I think a cuddle-sized baby blanket is really great for learning new stitch patterns because it's big enough to give you some really good practice, but it's not so big that it takes you months to make. This really is one of my absolute favorite stitches. I think it's really great for new knitters, especially if you've already mastered the basics like the garter stitch or the stockinette stitch. You really know knits and purls and you're ready to take the next step. When you knit something like this, it looks like you really know what you're doing. Even if you don't, it's simple enough that you don't have to know what you're doing. For this one, you'll want to start with an 8mm knitting needle, and you will need something that has a cord. Mainly because all of the stitches have to fit on the needle at once, and you need to have a cord. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the yarn, because that's really the big change that is coming with this update. So this here is the original blanket that I knit with the original yarn, Red Heart Amour. The closest substitute that I have found to that is Lion Brand Feels Like Butter. This stuff feels just as velvety. It's very similar in the thickness, and it's pretty easy to walk into pretty much any craft store and pick up this yarn. But there is another option for this. I stumbled upon Feels Like Butter Thick and Quick. And I think this could be a really good substitute as well, but you will have to make like one simple modification to this one. Since the original blanket has you hold 2 strands together at once and you knit them together, it creates a thicker yarn, but it's not quite as thick as this one. So if you decide to go with the Thick and Quick version, instead of using the 8mm, like the pattern recommends, I honestly would start with a 10 or a 12mm. Now, I haven't done this personally, so there will be some experimentation on your part for it. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work. It will be bigger, but you can follow the same pattern. The only thing you'll have to change is the needle size, and it'll probably be a few inches bigger than this one, which I believe is about 26 by 26. Give yourself a nice long tail to work the long tail cast on. Cast on 101 stitches using the long tail cast on. Now keep in mind that a single stitch casted on will have 2 strands because we're holding 2 strands together. Alright, when you have 101 stitches cast on, it'll look something like this, only of course you'll have a lot more stitches than I do for my little swatch here. Flip your work, so for row 1, you'll knit all stitches. And just to sort of prepare you a little bit, this has a 12-row repeat. It's not complicated, but it's involved. Now moving on to row 2, flip your work, and this time you'll purl every stitch. When you finish that, turn your work again, and here's where the real fun begins. So knit the first stitch, and here's the repeat for this row. Knit 3, purl 2, knit 1, purl 2. Then pull the yarn to the back and repeat, and keep going until you reach the last 4 stitches. When you do, simply knit all 4 of them. Alright, not too bad, right? So let's flip the work again, and for row 4, we'll start by knitting the first stitch. Then purl the next 3. And here's the repeat for row 4. Knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 3. So repeat that sequence to the last stitch. Then knit the last stitch. All right, moving on to row number 5, turn your work, and this time we're simply repeating what we did in row 3. So remember, we knit the first stitch, and for the repeat, knit 3, purl 2, knit 1, purl 2. Now don't worry if you're having a hard time remembering the repeats for this pattern. I don't expect that you'll memorize this, and really you don't need to. It's not complicated, but like I said, it is a little involved. So the best way to follow along is to have the pattern in front of you too. That way you're a lot more confident in what you're doing and you don't have to put the stress on yourself to memorize it. Now at this point, we start to see the pattern emerge. But go ahead and flip it and we'll get started on row 6. For this one, knit the first stitch and purl the next 3. Now the repeat here is the same for row 4. Knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 3. Keep going to the last stitch. And when you get there, you'll knit the last stitch and turn. Now fortunately, in row 7, we get a little bit of a break. This is our knit row, so knit every stitch. This row also marks the halfway point, so you're almost through it. Now flip it, and for row 8, as you probably guessed, this is a purl row, so purl every stitch. One thing I want to mention here is the pattern gets easier to memorize as you go, so if you're feeling so overwhelmed right now, don't give up on it yet. Many of the rows are the same, and the more you work them, the more sort of muscle memory you develop from doing them. I will note though that I never really got to the point where I memorized or trusted my memory for all 12 rows. So what I did was look at the pattern the entire project to guide me. I had the pattern in front of me, and whenever I completed a row, I made a check mark next to it. So that's how I knew where I was within the pattern, and I was confident in what row I was going into next. Okay, now what we've done here is set ourselves up to offset the next repeat so we get that basket weave look. So right now we have 2 seed stitch sections, and after we finish the next few rows, the second half of the repeat, we'll have 3, and they'll be situated on top of what we'll call the 3 pillars here. Again, yours is going to look different because you have the full blanket. I just have the swatch here, but the idea is the same. So to start row 9, knit the first stitch, and here's the repeat. Purl 1, knit 1, purl 2, knit 3, purl 1. And repeat that to the last 4 stitches. When you get to the last 4 stitches, you'll purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, and knit the last stitch. And of course, flip it. All right, we have just a couple more rows to go in the repeat. We're picking up on row 10. You'll knit the first stitch, then purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, and here's the repeat for this row. Knit 1, purl 3, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. Okay? Repeat that to the last stitch. Then of course, knit the last stitch, flip it, and we can see how we've shifted those seed stitch sections to the 3 pillars here, and yours should look something similar. All right, for row 11, which by the way is a repeat of row 9, knit the first stitch, and here's what you'll repeat in this row. Purl 1, knit 1, purl 2, knit 3, purl 1. Repeat that sequence to the last 4 stitches. And when you get to the last 4, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, and knit the last stitch. All right, just one more row to go. Moving on to row 12, which is a repeat of row 10, knit the first stitch, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, and what you'll repeat for this row, knit 1, purl 3, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. All right, repeat that to the last stitch. Then of course, knit the last stitch. So rows 1 through 12 are the repeat for this pattern. When you work that repeat, rows 1 through 12 a few times, it'll look something like this. We have a nice sort of basket weave pattern. When you get through the first 2 skeins, work it until you have about 6 or 7 inches and get your next 2 skeins ready. And now it doesn't matter where you are in the pattern in the repeat, you can use this joining method wherever you are in the pattern. Now I just so happened to be on a knit row when I made it through the first 2 skeins, but wherever you are, whatever your next stitch is, that's what you're going to work. So to add the new yarn, insert your needle through the next stitch, either knitwise or purlwise, wherever you are in the pattern. Then loop the new yarn, leaving another long tail, and place it over the needle. Then pull it through your stitch to finish it. Now it's helpful if you work a few more stitches after that because it's going to be really loose. That'll help to secure it a little bit. And then you can tie the 2 ends off. We'll weave those in just a bit. At this point, you have all the tools you need to continue knitting your blanket, so keep going by repeating rows 1 through 12 until your work measures about 26 inches from the cast on edge, ending after you finish a 7th row, which should be a knit row. And here's what your blanket will look like when you get that finished. And we'll bind off on a purl row so it matches the bottom. To do that, purl the first 2 stitches, then pass the first loop over the last. Then purl the next stitch and pass it over. Now you'll probably notice I'm pulling the yarn back when I pass it over. That just makes it a little bit easier. So that's the repeat. Purl a stitch, pass it over to bind it off, and keep going until you have just 1 loop left on your needle. When you do, pull up on that loop, trim the yarn, and pull the tail through your loop to fasten it off. And lastly, we'll weave in these ends. So yeah, that's really all there is to knitting the stitch pattern. I would say the challenge for this one will be in keeping track of where you are within your repeat. And honestly, the best way to do that is to have the pattern in front of you as you're working it. So you can view the pattern completely free on my website. I have the link to that in the description. But it also might be helpful to have a printed copy in front of you that you can physically check off the rows as you complete them. Obviously not required, but if you think that that is something that will help you, I will link to that in the description as well. B.Hooked.com is our shop for all of our PDF patterns, PDF pattern bundles. We've got some t-shirts as well. So if you do want to support me and my work and the channel and what we're doing here, that's a great way of doing so. Happy knitting, and I'll see you in the next one.